My name is Eleanor Vance. For 35 years, I was an accountant, a woman who understood that every number tells a story, and that the fine print is where the truth is buried. I never imagined that the most devastating story of my life would be written not in a corporate ledger, but within the walls of my own home. To put it plainly, my son Thomas conspired with his wife, Isabella, to kick me out of the house. They did not use overt force. They used weapons far crueler. Feigned concern for my health, whispers about my fading memory, and the constant, suffocating performance of love. They twisted my trust into a signature on a series of documents they claimed were for my protection. In reality, those papers were the keys to my own prison, designed to strip me of everything I owned. Their plan, however, had one critical flaw. In their greed, they saw me only as a sentimental, forgetful old woman. They forgot the woman who had spent a lifetime scrutinizing details and uncovering discrepancies. They forgot that an accountant knows how to follow a paper trail, no matter how cleverly it is hidden. They thought they were closing the book on my life. Instead, they opened a ledger of their own crimes. And I, Eleanor Vance, would make certain every last one of them was accounted for. Before their arrival, my life at the Willows was governed by a quiet and reassuring rhythm. The house itself, which my late husband Richard and I had built from a field of dreams, was my partner in this gentle routine. Each morning, the sun would slant through the east-facing kitchen window, a silent alarm I had come to rely on for over 40 years. My mornings were for the garden, a place where I could feel the earth breathe and coax life from dormant seeds. My hands, though wrinkled, were strong, and they knew the language of the soil. Tending to the roses was a conversation with my past, each bud a memory, each thorn a gentle warning. Afternoons were dedicated to the careful stewardship of the life Richard and I had built. In his study, surrounded by the comforting scent of old paper and wood polish, I was not a lonely widow, but a competent manager. The Vance estate was not a simple matter, but my mind, honed by decades of balancing accounts, navigated its complexities with ease. I tracked investments, paid bills long before they were due, and reconciled statements to the penny. This was my domain, a world of logic and order where every variable was accounted for. I felt secure, anchored by the sturdy pilings of my own competence. Yet a house as large as the Willows holds silence in its bones. The echoes of my footsteps were often the only sound, a stark reminder of the boisterous life that once filled its halls. I missed the thud of muddy boots by the back door, the distant sound of a television, the simple, profound comfort of knowing I was not alone. It was a subtle, creeping loneliness, one I rarely acknowledged even to myself. But it was there, a fallow field in my heart, waiting for a seed. I did not realize then that some seeds are planted only to choke out the light. The seed was planted with a single, frantic phone call from Thomas. His voice was laced with a carefully measured panic. Their apartment building had been sold, he said, and the new owners were evicting everyone. They had 60 days to find a new place in an impossible market. Isabella is beside herself, he'd lamented, his voice cracking just so. We just do not know what to do. Every maternal instinct I possessed surged to the surface, a tidal wave that washed away all reason. My son was in trouble. That was the only fact that mattered. You will come here, I had said. The words a reflex, not a decision. This is your home. His relief was a performance in itself, a long, heartfelt sigh. Mom, are you sure? We would not be a burden. We can pay rent, of course. The very idea was offensive to me. Do not be ridiculous, I told him. The warmth of my own generosity, a pleasant feeling. Having you here is all the payment I need. They arrived 2 weeks later on a perfect autumn afternoon, the trees ablaze in gold and crimson. They came with only a few suitcases, a deliberate choice, as I later understood, to make their presence seem minimal, like a casual visit. The love bombing began the moment Isabella stepped out of the car. She rushed to embrace me, pressing a lavishly wrapped box from a high-end chocolatier into my hands. Eleanor, you are our absolute savior, she said, her smile a dazzling work of art. Her eyes swept the porch, the garden, the facade of the house. What a magnificent place. You have kept it so beautifully. Thomas played his part as the dutiful son, immediately noticing a loose shutter on a second-floor window and promising to fix it first thing in the morning. He spoke of wanting to take the burden of home maintenance off my shoulders, to finally step into his father's shoes. Those first weeks were a golden age, a masterfully constructed illusion of domestic bliss. Isabella, a fabulous cook, took over the kitchen, filling the house with the aromas of roasted garlic and fresh herbs. She would sit with me in the garden for hours, drawing out stories of my past, her gaze full of what I mistook for genuine fascination. They filled the quiet spaces of my home with laughter, with conversation, with the vibrant energy of their lives. I felt my loneliness recede like a low tide, and in its place, a profound and foolish gratitude grew. I ignored the brief, hushed arguments they had when they thought I was out of earshot. I dismissed the expensive new clothes Isabella wore. Despite their supposed financial troubles, I saw only the beautiful picture they painted, because I wanted to believe it was real. The campaign to seize control of my life was a masterpiece of subtlety. It began with the mail. Isabella would retrieve it from the box at the end of the driveway, a small, helpful gesture that rerouted the flow of all my financial information through her hands. She would sort it at the kitchen table, making innocent comments. Oh, another statement from the brokerage firm. Goodness, these property tax bills are daunting, are they not? She was not just sorting letters. She was gathering intelligence. Next, she appointed herself the manager of household bills. It is all done online these days, Eleanor, she explained, with the patient tone one uses for a child. It is so much more efficient. Let me set up automatic payments for you. You will never have to worry about a due date again. It sounded sensible, modern. To facilitate this, I gave her what she needed: account numbers, access, passwords. I was a fish admiring a beautiful, shiny lure, unaware of the hook concealed within. With her hooks in my bank accounts, she began to target the estate itself. She found me in the study one evening, the quarterly investment reports spread across the desk. She did not enter but leaned against the door frame, her expression a careful blend of admiration and pity. You are amazing, you know that? She said softly, the way you handle all this. But it breaks my heart to see you chained to this desk. This is your time to relax, to travel, to live. Richard would have wanted you to have a life of joy, not endless paperwork. The invocation of my husband's name was her most powerful tool. It was a key that unlocked my deepest sentiments. I am not burdened, Isabella, I insisted, though a part of me felt the weariness she was describing. I need to keep my mind sharp. Of course you do, she said, walking over and placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. And we want that too. Think of us as your executive team. You are the CEO, you make the big decisions. We just handle the day-to-day operations. Let us lift this weight. Let us take care of you. It was an offer of liberation, a promise of a golden, carefree retirement. It was also a declaration of intent to strip me of my autonomy. The poison was so sweet, I drank it down without a second thought. The final push came from Thomas. He cornered me one afternoon in the living room, his face etched with a sincere and troubled look. Isabella was out shopping. This was a calculated, one-on-one appeal. Mom, we need to talk, he began, sitting on the ottoman before my chair. Isabella told me you are still hesitant about letting us manage the finances. I am just cautious, Thomas, I said. Your father and I built this life through careful planning. I know, he said, and he took my hands in his. His were warm and strong. And you did an incredible job. But now it is my turn to be careful for you. Before Dad died, he told me my most important job was to look after you. I feel like I'm failing him when I see you stressed out by all this paperwork. Please, Mom, let me do this. Let me finally step up and be the man he would want me to be. Trust me. He looked into my eyes, and his were pleading. How does a mother say no to that? How does she deny her only son the chance to fulfill his father's dying wish? In that moment, any remaining professional skepticism I held was washed away by a wave of maternal love and obligation. My caution felt like a betrayal of him, of Richard, of the very idea of family. That night, they staged the event. Isabella cooked a celebratory dinner. A bottle of expensive champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket. After the meal, she produced a handsome leather portfolio. Just a few formalities to make everything official, she said, her voice bright and cheerful. She sat beside me at the dining table, Thomas on my other side. She laid out the documents, a formidable stack of paper. She explained each one in layman's terms, her voice a soothing balm that glossed over the harsh legal realities buried in the text. A durable power of attorney for financial matters, a document adding their names to the house deed for estate planning purposes, a simple authorization for investment management, My mind, the mind of Eleanor Vance, accountant, screamed a silent warning. Read the fine print, call your lawyer, stop. But my heart, the heart of Eleanor Vance, mother, was overwhelmed. I looked at my son's smiling face. I felt the warmth of their presence in the home that had been so quiet for so long. To refuse now would be to shatter this beautiful new reality, to declare war on the people I loved. I picked up the pen. With a steady hand I did not feel, I signed where Isabella's finger pointed. Page after page, my signature, my assent, my surrender. There, she said, gathering the documents with a crisp finality. The first day of your new, worry-free life. My new life began with the systematic erasure of my old one. Isabella, now empowered, hired interior decorators. She called it modernizing. I called it a desecration. Richard's favorite armchair, its leather worn smooth by years of his presence, was the first to go. It was replaced by a sterile white couch that was as uncomfortable as it was stylish. Next were the photos on the mantelpiece, the candid snapshots of a lifetime of family holidays and milestones. They were packed away in a box and replaced with abstract sculptures. The warm, cream-colored walls were painted a cold, institutional gray. Every change, big and small, was a calculated blow, an effort to strip the house of my history and remake it in her image. When I protested, my voice trembling with grief over the loss of Richard's favorite lamp, Isabella's response was a masterclass in psychological abuse. She put her arm around me, her voice dripping with pity. "Oh, Eleanor, that old thing was a fire hazard. We found a much safer, more energy-efficient one. Your safety is our #1 priority. You see, we are taking care of you." My objections were framed as irrational sentimentality. My grief was treated as a symptom of age-related confusion. The gaslighting intensified. Precious items began to disappear. A silver locket my mother had given me vanished from my jewelry box. When I asked about it, my heart pounding with dread, Isabella feigned a deep, thoughtful frown. "A locket? I do not recall seeing it. Are you absolutely certain it was there? You have been misplacing things a lot lately, sweetie. It is okay. It happens to everyone." Her certainty was unnerving. She made me question the evidence of my own eyes, the reliability of my own mind. One evening, she mentioned a conversation we had supposedly had the day before about selling a small parcel of land we owned. I had no memory of it because it had never happened. "You do not remember?" she asked, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. "We talked about it for an hour yesterday in the garden." "Oh, Eleanor, I'm starting to get worried about you." That night, a cold fear unlike any I had ever known settled deep within me. This was not forgetfulness. This was an attack. I went to my desk and took out a simple cloth-bound journal. On the first page, I wrote the date. Then I wrote, "They are trying to make me believe I am losing my mind. They are lying about my things and our conversations. I am not crazy." It was a small act in the deep silence of the night, but it was a beginning. It was the first piece of evidence, and my accountant's mind knew, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that I was going to need a lot more. The war had been declared, and I had just begun to fight back. My secret journal became my only confidant, its pages the sole repository of my sanity. During the day, I was a ghost in my own home, navigating a landscape of polite smiles and veiled condescension. At night, I would lock my bedroom door and write, the scratching of my pen a small rebellion in the oppressive silence. I documented everything. The disappearance of a silver picture frame from the mantelpiece, a comment from Thomas about my expensive grocery tastes, an appointment I had with my doctor that Isabella canceled, claiming I had told her I was feeling better. Each entry was a stone I placed on the scales of truth, a defense against the gaslighting that sought to erode my mind. The first true sign that I was being deliberately isolated came in the form of my oldest friend, Margaret. She lived just 2 streets away, and for 30 years, we had a standing appointment for tea every Thursday afternoon. The first week after the signing, I called to cancel, making up an excuse about a headache, as I was too emotionally raw to face her. The following Thursday, however, I was desperate for the comfort of a friendly, sane face, but Margaret did not arrive. She did not even call. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. It was not like her. I called her number, but it went straight to her voicemail. The next day, I tried again. Nothing. Finally, on Saturday, I slipped out of the house while Isabella and Thomas were out on an errand, my heart pounding like a fugitive's. I walked the familiar route to Margaret's home and rang the bell. She opened the door and her face registered a brief flash of shock before settling into a look of deep concern. "Eleanor, my goodness," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I have been so worried. Are you all right?" "I have been trying to call you," I said, my voice trembling with relief. She led me inside, her brow furrowed. "I was the one calling you, Eleanor. I called on Wednesday to confirm our tea, and Isabella told me you were far too unwell for visitors. She said you have been having some very difficult days and were not to be disturbed. She promised she would pass on my love." The world seemed to sway beneath my feet. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "She never told me," I whispered. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "That is not all. I tried to visit yesterday, just to drop off some soup. Thomas met me at the door. He was very polite. But he said you were sleeping and that the doctor had insisted on absolute rest. He said he would call me if anything changed. They were building a wall around me, brick by brick, lie by lie. They were cutting me off from the outside world, ensuring that my reality was only the one they presented to me. I was not just a prisoner in my own home, I was being held in solitary confinement. With my isolation secured, they unveiled the true purpose of their conspiracy. They did it one evening in the living room, the room that now bore no resemblance to the one Richard and I had created. Isabella, glowing with excitement, placed a glossy brochure on the new glass coffee table. The cover showed a gleaming tower of steel and glass overlooking the ocean. The title read, "The Ethelgard Residences, Luxury Living Redefined." "We have found the most incredible investment opportunity," she announced, her voice ringing with passion. Thomas, seated beside her, nodded eagerly, a puppet on her string. She opened the brochure. The pages were filled with images of opulent apartments, floor-to-ceiling windows, sprawling marble bathrooms, state-of-the-art kitchens. "It is a new development," Isabella explained, her finger tracing the lines of a blueprint. "A once-in-a-lifetime chance to get in on the ground floor. We are talking about true generational wealth, Eleanor, enough to secure this family's future for decades." I looked at the pictures, then at their excited faces. I did not understand what this had to do with me. "There is a substantial initial investment required," Thomas said, taking over the pitch. "We have some capital, but to get the kind of unit that will yield the highest return, we need more." My blood ran cold. I knew what was coming before the words left Isabella's mouth. She looked at me, her expression one of profound, loving sincerity. "We believe it is time to sell the Willows." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. Sell the Willows? This house? My home? The idea was monstrous, unthinkable. This house was my life's work, the heart of my memories, the last tangible piece of Richard I had left. "Never," I said, the word a raw tear in the fabric of the room. "This house is not for sale." Isabella did not flinch. Her smile remained, patient and condescending. "Eleanor, you must be practical. This house is a relic. It is enormous, expensive to maintain, and frankly, it is not a liquid asset. By transferring its value into the Ethelgard, we are not losing a home. We are gaining a future. We have even picked out a stunning 2-bedroom unit for you in the same building. Ocean views, a concierge. No more worrying about leaky roofs or property taxes. It is a perfect solution." It was not a solution. It was an execution. They wanted to tear down my life, sell the pieces, and use the profits to build a monument to their own greed. And they had the audacity to present it as a gift. My refusal was met not with anger, but with a campaign of calculated emotional warfare. My love for them was turned into a weapon and used against me at every opportunity. Every conversation became a battleground. "How can you not see this is for the best?" Isabella would ask, her voice full of theatrical hurt. "We are trying to build a future for your son, for your future grandchildren. Are you saying your attachment to some old floorboards is more important than that?" My attachment, as she called it, was to the spot on those floorboards where Daniel took his first steps. It was to the fireplace where Richard had proposed to me. It was to the window where I had watched Thomas leave for his first day of school. These were not old floorboards. They were the foundations of my soul. Thomas, in his role as the good cop, would approach me when I was alone, his eyes full of pleading. "Mom, this is my one big chance to prove myself. I have never been as smart as Daniel or as successful as Dad. This is my shot. Are you really going to stand in my way? We are doing this for you too. We do it only because we love you. Those words, "we love you," became a constant refrain, a sickeningly sweet poison they drizzled over every cruel manipulation. They used it to justify their pressure, to invalidate my feelings, to paint me as the villain in my own story. My refusal to sell was not seen as a valid desire, but as a selfish act, a failure to love them enough. The house grew tense. The happy chatter was replaced by heavy silences and forced, polite conversation. My home had become a cold war zone, and I was the lone holdout, a nation of one under siege. My accountant's mind rebelled against the emotional onslaught. I decided to fight back on the only terrain I understood: facts and figures. If this investment was so brilliant, then it should be able to withstand scrutiny. "I demand to see the full prospectus," I told them one morning, my voice firmer than I had felt in weeks. "I want the financial statements for the development company, the list of partners, and the risk analysis." Isabella barely looked up from her laptop. She gave a little laugh, a sound as sharp and cold as breaking glass. "Oh, Eleanor, that is very sweet. But this is not like balancing a household budget. These are complex financial instruments. It is all very confidential, high-level stuff. It would not make any sense to you." The condescension was breathtaking. She was dismissing my 35-year career as if it were a quaint little hobby. "I know how to read a balance sheet, Isabella," I said through gritted teeth. "Of course you do," she said, finally looking at me with that same pitying smile. "But the market has changed. It is all about leveraging debt and derivatives now. It is a new world. Let us handle it. We are the experts here." She had an answer for everything. When I pressed for the documents, she produced a few doctored pages that were full of impressive-sounding jargon but contained no real data. When I asked for the name of their broker, she claimed he only worked with elite clients and could not be disturbed. My skills were useless. My expertise was a wall she simply walked around. Facts did not matter in a world built on lies. Her refusal to provide any real information was the biggest red flag of all. Yet I was powerless to do anything about it. I was the expert they had sought out to sign the initial papers, but now that they had control, my expertise was an inconvenience they were determined to ignore. The feeling of impotence was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. The constant, grinding pressure began to take its toll. I was exhausted, emotionally and mentally. Sleep offered little escape, my dreams filled with images of wrecking balls and strangers walking through my home. During the day, I was adrift in a sea of doubt. Was I being unreasonable? Was I the selfish, stubborn old woman they painted me to be? Their version of reality was so relentless, so unwavering, that it began to seep into the cracks of my own conviction. My journal was my only anchor. At night, I would read back my own words, reaffirming the truth. They are lying. This is not love. This is theft. The final blow of part 2, the one that shattered my remaining defenses, came on a rainy Tuesday. I was in the upstairs hallway when a courier arrived. Isabella met him at the door and signed for a thick, important-looking envelope. She took it to the study and closed the door, but not before I saw the logo printed in the corner, a prominent life insurance company. My heart stopped. Life insurance? Why? Later that night, long after they had gone to bed, I crept into the study. The envelope was in the wastepaper basket, torn into pieces. My hands trembled as I carefully reassembled the shreds on the surface of Richard's desk. It was a confirmation letter, a new multi-million-dollar life insurance policy, on my life, with Isabella listed as the sole beneficiary. The words blurred before my eyes. This was not just about the house anymore. This was not just about money. The sale of the Willows was meant to be the first step. My accidental death was to be the final, most profitable transaction of all. I stumbled back to my room, the shredded papers clutched in my hand. I collapsed onto my bed, a silent scream trapped in my throat. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. All doubt was gone, replaced by a terrifying, absolute certainty. They did not just want my home. They wanted me dead. And my son, my own child, was a part of it. The last vestiges of my hope, my love, and my strength crumbled into dust. I was completely and utterly broken. The night I found the insurance policy was the night the woman I had been for 68 years died. I did not sleep. I lay perfectly still in my bed, the shredded documents a pile of damning confetti on my nightstand, and let the full, monstrous truth wash over me. The pain was a physical entity, a block of ice forming in my chest, freezing everything inside me. Grief was a part of it, a profound, bottomless sorrow for the son I had loved, the boy who was now a stranger plotting my end. But beneath the grief, a different feeling began to stir. It was cold, hard, and utterly clear. It was rage. The love of a mother is a powerful, elemental force, but the betrayal of that love creates an equal and opposite reaction. The unconditional love I had felt for Thomas had been predicated on a single, unspoken condition, that he would not try to murder me. He and his wife had broken that covenant, and in doing so, they had freed me. They had extinguished the very maternal instinct that had made me so vulnerable. When the sun rose, casting gray light into my room, I was not the same person who had watched it set. The grief was still there, an echoing cavern inside me, but it was no longer my driving force. My new purpose was survival, and survival would require justice. The accountant in me, the woman who believed in balanced ledgers and consequences for misdeeds, took control. They had made a fatal miscalculation, and I would be the one to audit their crimes. I went downstairs, my movements slow and deliberate. I found them in the kitchen, their backs to me, speaking in low, urgent tones. I froze in the hallway, hidden by the shadows. "It is taking too long," Isabella was saying, her voice a sharp, impatient hiss. "Your mother is stalling. Every day she refuses to sign the listing agreement is another day of risk." "She will sign," Thomas mumbled, his voice lacking conviction. "She is just emotional." "We do not have time for emotional," she snapped. "The partners for the Ethelgard deal are getting nervous. We need to show them the capital from the house sale. Besides, the cabin in the mountains is booked for the anniversary next month. That is the deadline, Thomas. Everything has to be done by then. No more delays. A mountain cabin, an anniversary, a deadline. They had a plan, a timeline. Their words, meant for each other, were a gift to me. They gave me the parameters of my new reality. I had 1 month to save my own life. I retreated up the stairs, my heart not pounding with fear, but beating with the slow, steady rhythm of a clock that had just been wound. They expected tears. They expected arguments. What they did not expect was surrender. I spent an hour in my room, practicing in the mirror. I let my shoulders slump. I drained the fight from my eyes, leaving them dull and watery. I practiced a tremor for my hands. When I was ready, I went back downstairs. They were sitting at the kitchen table. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame as if for support. They both looked up, their faces prepared for another confrontation. "I have been thinking," I said, my voice a weak, broken whisper. "You are right." Isabella's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in surprise. Thomas looked at me, his expression a mixture of relief and guilt. "This house," I continued, waving a trembling hand vaguely. "It is too much. The memories, they are too heavy. Maybe a fresh start is what we all need. I will sign the listing papers." Isabella's surprise melted into a triumphant, predatory smile. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, rushing to my side and enveloping me in a cold, perfumed hug. "I am so glad you are finally seeing reason. This is for the best, you will see. We are going to be so happy." Thomas came over, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you, Mom," he said, his voice thick. "Thank you for trusting me." I endured their embraces, my body rigid, my mind a block of ice. Their relief, their condescending pity, was nauseating. But it was also my shield. They saw a broken old woman who had finally given up. They did not see the predator that was looking back at them from behind my eyes. From that moment on, my weakness became my strength, my compliance, my camouflage. For the next week, I played my part to perfection. I was quiet, docile, and melancholic. I allowed Isabella to lead me through discussions about real estate agents and staging the house for sale. I nodded and agreed to everything, making only small sentimental requests that reinforced their image of me as a harmless, defeated woman. This performance gave me the cover I needed. My opportunity came the following Tuesday. Isabella had made a dental appointment for me, a transparent excuse to get me out of the house and, no doubt, to have me assessed for any cognitive decline by a professional she had some connection with. She planned to drive me. "No, my dear," I said, patting her arm with my trembling hand. "You have so much to do with the house sale. I will take a taxi. I need to feel a little independent, you know." My perceived fragility worked in my favor. She agreed, likely thinking a short trip on my own could do little harm. She called the taxi for me, and I left the house, a free woman for the first time in months. I did not go to the dentist. I had the driver take me to a small cafe in the next town. My hands shook as I pulled a prepaid mobile phone from my purse, one I had purchased in cash at a pharmacy the week before. There was only one person in the world I could trust. I dialed the number from memory. He answered on the second ring. Arthur speaking. Arthur, I said, and my voice broke with the sheer relief of hearing his. It is Eleanor Vance. The line was silent for a moment, then his voice boomed, full of warmth and concern. Eleanor, my goodness, it has been too long. How are you, my dear? I have tried calling, but your son said you were not well. That is what I need to talk to you about, I said, my voice dropping. I am in trouble, Arthur. Serious trouble. Can we meet? It cannot be at my house. His tone shifted immediately, the friendly warmth replaced by the sharp, analytical focus of the brilliant lawyer he had once been. Of course. Name the place. We met an hour later in a quiet corner of the city's main library, a place of hushed tones and anonymity. The sight of him, his kind, craggy face and clear, intelligent eyes, was like a lifeline. I told him everything. I started with the signing of the documents and ended with the life insurance policy and the conversation I had overheard about the mountain cabin. I did not cry. My voice was low and steady, a recitation of facts, an accountant delivering a grim report. He listened without interruption, his hands clasped on the table. As I spoke, his face grew darker, his jaw tightening until his knuckles were white. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. The treacherous, greedy little monsters, he finally said, his voice a low growl of pure fury. He reached across the table and covered my hands with his. Eleanor, you did the right thing by coming to me. You are in danger, but we are going to fight this. We are going to bury them. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I was no longer alone. Arthur's mind was a beautiful and dangerous thing to behold. Within minutes, he had formulated a plan. First, you continue your performance, he instructed me, his eyes sharp. You are the frail, compliant mother. You agree to everything. We need them to feel secure. Their arrogance will be their undoing. Second, he said, we need more than your testimony. We need undeniable proof. We need to hear their plans in their own voices. He slid a small padded envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside were two devices, each no larger than a sugar cube. One was a high-fidelity audio recorder with a long-lasting battery. The other was a micro camera with a wide-angle lens. Put the recorder somewhere in the living room, he said, tapping the device. Under a table behind a bookshelf, someplace they talk freely. Put the camera in the study, where they handle their paperwork. We need a record of the documents they are forging and signing on your behalf. The idea was terrifying. But the thought of what they planned for me was more so. I nodded, my resolve hardening. The next day, I executed the plan. While Isabella was on a long phone call in the garden and Thomas was in town running errands, I went to work. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I felt like a spy in my own home. I secured the audio recorder with a small piece of black tape to the underside of the heavy oak coffee table, the last remaining piece of Richard's furniture they had not yet banished to the basement. It was a small act of poetic justice. In the study, I placed the tiny camera on a high shelf, nestled between two thick legal books. Its lens, the size of a pinhead, had a clear view of the desk where Isabella now conducted her business, the business of stealing my life. That evening, as I sat with them in the living room, pretending to watch television, the small device beneath the table was silently, faithfully recording. The war had gone from a defensive posture to an offensive one. I was no longer just a victim. I was gathering my arsenal. Chapter 15, The Performance of a Lifetime. Living a double life was the most exhausting thing I have ever done. I had to be two people at once, the fragile, grieving widow on the surface, and the cold, calculating strategist underneath. Every meal was a performance. Every conversation was a chess match. I learned to use their own arrogance against them. I would ask seemingly innocent, muddle-headed questions designed to elicit incriminating responses, always making sure we were in the living room. That Ethelgard place looks so modern, I would say, my voice full of feigned wonder. Are you sure the investment is safe? My old-fashioned mind has trouble understanding it. This was the perfect bait for Isabella's ego. She would launch into a detailed explanation of their scheme, unable to resist showing off how clever she was. She would boast about the shell corporations they had set up to hide the money, about the fraudulent profit projections they had created, about how, once I was gone, the life insurance payout would allow them to acquire an even larger stake. She was confessing to fraud and conspiracy to commit murder, all while trying to soothe the fears of a confused old woman. Each night, I would retrieve the memory card from the recorder, lock myself in my bathroom, and listen to the day's recordings through a tiny earpiece. Hearing their casual cruelty, the way they discussed my death as if it were a business transaction, scoured my soul. But it also hardened my resolve into something unbreakable. I played my part in the sale of the house, meeting with the real estate agent and signing the listing agreement with a trembling hand, a single tear rolling down my cheek for effect. They bought the performance completely. As the date of the anniversary trip to the mountain cabin grew closer, the recordings became more specific. They discussed their plans for the hike, how a sudden fall from a scenic cliff would be a tragic, unavoidable accident. They talked about how Thomas's grief would have to be convincing. I delivered copies of the most damning recordings to Arthur every few days, using my therapy appointments as a pretext to leave the house. He was building a case with the district attorney's office, a silent, powerful machine that was preparing to move. They thought they were in control. They thought they were leading a lamb to the slaughter. They had no idea that the lamb was listening, recording, and preparing a trap of her own. The deadline they had set for my death was now the deadline for their own downfall. The morning of the trip to the mountains, the house was filled with a sickening, artificial cheer. Isabella fluttered around me, packing a bag with my warmest sweaters and talking endlessly about the restorative powers of the crisp mountain air. Her solicitousness was a grotesque parody of love, each pat on my arm a reminder of the cliff's edge she had chosen for me. Thomas was quiet, his face pale and drawn. He was a man being marched to a gallows of his own making, the guilt eating him from the inside out. He could not meet my eyes. I played my part, the frail mother being whisked away for a lovely anniversary celebration. Inside, I was a coiled spring, every nerve alight with a mixture of terror and ice-cold resolve. Before we left, I excused myself to the bathroom and made one final brief call to Arthur on my burner phone. "They are leaving now," I whispered. "Everything is in place, Eleanor." His voice was a firm, steady anchor. "The local sheriff's department is aware of the situation. They are on standby. We have your location. You will not be alone. Just stick to the plan." The plan? It sounded so simple, so clean. But my life would depend on my ability to see it through. The car ride was 3 hours of suffocating tension. Isabella drove, chattering brightly about the quaint little towns we passed, while I sat in the passenger seat and pretended to admire the scenery. Thomas was a silent, brooding presence in the back. Outside, the world was beautiful, a tapestry of autumn colors under a brilliant blue sky. The beauty was a cruel joke, a lovely stage for an ugly play. I could feel their plan pressing in on me, a tangible thing in the confined space of the car. They thought they were driving me to my death. They had no idea I was driving them to their judgment. The cabin was exactly what I had feared. Beautiful, remote, and utterly isolated. It was perched on the side of a mountain, surrounded by a dense forest of pine and fir, with a panoramic view of the valley below. There was no other sign of human life for miles. It was a perfect place to disappear. As we unpacked, Isabella was in her element, pointing out the rustic charm of the stone fireplace and the stunning view from the large deck. "It is breathtaking, is it not?" she said, her arms sweeping across the vista. "Tomorrow we will hike up to Eagle's Peak. The view from there is even more spectacular. You can see the whole world." Eagle's Peak. So my murder had a name. That evening, they made a pretense of celebrating their wedding anniversary. Isabella cooked a steak dinner, and Thomas opened a bottle of expensive red wine. They raised their glasses to me. "To Mom," Isabella said, her dark eyes gleaming in the firelight, "for making all of this possible, for giving us our future." I raised my glass, my hand miraculously steady. "To family," I said, looking from her face to my son's, "and to getting everything you deserve." Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Later, as a storm began to gather over the mountain peaks, the wind howling around the eaves of the cabin, I knew the time for performance was over. The time for truth had come. They were cleaning up in the kitchen, their backs to the living room where I sat before the fire. The first clap of thunder rattled the windows. I did not raise my voice. I spoke into the tense silence. I have been thinking a great deal about Daniel lately. The sound of a plate clattering in the sink was the only reply. They both froze. Slowly, they turned to face me. Thomas looked like he had seen a ghost. Isabella's face was a careful, neutral mask. "What about him?" she asked, her voice tight. I looked at the fire, at the way the flames consumed the wood. I remembered his drowning. The official report called it a tragic accident, a sudden storm on the lake, a capsized boat. I never truly believed it. He was too strong a swimmer, too careful a boater. "Arthur has a friend," I said conversationally, "a private investigator, a very thorough man. He has a gift for uncovering things that have been buried for a long time. He was looking into Isabella's work history, you see, for a different matter, and he found the most interesting story. Isabella did not move. She was a statue carved from ice. He found a story about a young woman at a boutique investment firm," I continued, my voice calm and even. "A story about $1 million that went missing from a client's account. And he found a story about that young woman's boyfriend, a bright, honest young man who uncovered the embezzlement and threatened to expose her. My son, Daniel." Thomas made a small, strangled sound. "The investigator discovered that the day Daniel died, he had confronted you, Isabella. He was going to go to the police the very next morning. But he never got the chance, because you went out on the lake with him, and you loosened the drain plug on the boat. And when he was in the water trying to fix it, you hit him over the head with an oar. You held him under until he stopped struggling. It was not a storm that killed my son. It was you." The mask on Isabella's face cracked, but I was not finished. I turned my gaze to my other son, the one still living. And the worst part, the part that truly haunts me, is that you were there, Thomas. You were on the shore. The investigator found an old witness, a fisherman who was too far away to help, but saw 2 people on the shore and 1 in the boat with Daniel. You saw what she did, and you did nothing. You let her kill your brother, and you have kept her secret all these years. The dam of deceit and guilt shattered. Thomas collapsed onto a chair, his body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. He was a broken man, destroyed by a truth he had carried for a decade. Isabella, however, did not break. She transformed. The charming, sophisticated mask dissolved completely, and in its place was a face of pure, venomous rage. All pretense of civility was gone. "He was a fool!" she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly thing. "A self-righteous, sentimental fool just like you? He would have ruined my life? He got what he deserved." She took a step toward me, her hands clenched into fists. "And you with your constant digging and your quiet little judgments. You were supposed to just sign the papers and fade away." I stood up to face her, my fear eclipsed by a cold, righteous fury. "It is over, Isabella. Arthur has given everything to the police. The recordings of you planning my murder, the evidence of your financial fraud, and now, the proof that you killed Daniel. They know we are here. They are on their way." For a single, terrifying second, she froze. I saw the calculation in her eyes as the truth of her situation dawned on her. She was trapped, exposed, with no way out. And in that moment, the cornered animal did the only thing it knew how to do. It attacked. With a scream of pure hatred, she lunged at me. She was not trying to push me off a cliff anymore. This was a raw, desperate attempt to silence me, to destroy the source of her ruin. She slammed into me, knocking me backward over the coffee table. My head struck the stone hearth of the fireplace, and the room exploded in a flash of white-hot pain. Through the ringing in my ears, I could hear Thomas screaming my name, a useless, pathetic sound. I fought back, my hands clawing at her face, my legs kicking. But she was younger, stronger, and fueled by a feral panic. Her hands found my throat, and she squeezed, her face a mask of triumphant fury. The room began to go dark at the edges. My breath caught in my chest. This is it, I thought. A strange sense of calm washing over me. This is the end. And then, above the roar of the storm outside and the blood pounding in my ears, I heard another sound. The sound of a heavy door being smashed open. The sound of the door splintering from its frame was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For a moment, the world was a chaotic tableau of motion and noise. Uniformed figures flooded the room, their voices sharp, authoritative commands that cut through the howl of the storm. Hands, strong and sure, tore Isabella away from me. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, the raw imprint of her fingers burning on my throat. Every breath a ragged, painful gift. Isabella did not surrender. She fought like a cornered animal, screaming curses, her face a mask of primal fury. But she was no match for the two sheriff's deputies who subdued her, forcing her wrists into handcuffs. Across the room, another officer was pulling a sobbing, incoherent Thomas to his feet. He was a puppet with his strings cut, a hollowed-out man. A figure knelt beside me, and I looked up into the kind, furious face of Arthur. He was flanked by a tall, calm man in a sheriff's uniform. "It is over, Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are safe now." The sheriff looked down at me, his eyes full of respect. "Ma'am, my name is Sheriff Brody. Arthur has told us everything. Are you injured?" "My throat," I rasped, "but I am alive." As the deputies began to lead Isabella and Thomas away, their alliance, forged in greed, finally and completely shattered. "This is his fault," Isabella shrieked, twisting to point a cuffed hand at her husband. "He was too weak. He was supposed to handle you, Thomas." His face streaked with tears and snot, looked at her with pure, unadulterated hatred. "She killed him," he sobbed, his words tumbling out in a desperate final confession to the officers. "She killed my brother, Daniel. Years ago, I saw it. She killed him, and she was going to kill my mother, too." The deputies exchanged a grim, knowing look. Their downfall was complete, sealed by their own panicked, mutual betrayal. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out a tiny, innocuous-looking USB drive. I handed it to Sheriff Brody. "It is all on here," I said, my voice gaining a fraction of its strength. Every conversation, every lie, every detail of their plan. He took it from my hand as if it were a piece of sacred evidence. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance," he said quietly. "Now let us get you out of here." As they led me from the cabin into the rain-swept night, I did not look back at my son. The boy I had raised, the child I had loved, no longer existed. He was a ghost, and this cabin, this mountain, was his tomb. The months that followed were a blur of legal proceedings. They were cold, methodical, and impersonal, a stark contrast to the raw, emotional violence I had endured. My evidence was the heart of the prosecution's case. The secret audio recordings were played in the silent, stunned courtroom. The jurors heard Isabella's condescending explanations of their fraudulent schemes. They heard her cold, dismissive tone as she discussed my murder. They heard their arguments, their greed, their utter lack of humanity, all in their own voices. The financial trail, painstakingly pieced together by Arthur and the district attorney's office, was equally damning. The hidden camera footage showed Isabella forging my signature on documents, transferring my assets into shell corporations they controlled. And Thomas, in exchange for a plea deal, gave a full, detailed confession that corroborated everything, including a tearful, horrifying account of his brother's death a decade earlier. Isabella's trial was a spectacle. She was remorseless, defiant to the end, her lawyers attempting to paint me as a vindictive, mentally unstable old woman. But the recordings did not lie. The numbers did not lie. Her own husband's testimony did not lie. The verdict was swift, guilty, on all counts. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Daniel Vance, with a consecutive sentence of 25 years for the conspiracy to murder me and multiple counts of felony fraud. She did not weep. She simply stared at me from across the courtroom, her eyes 2 chips of black ice. Thomas was sentenced a week later. For his cooperation, he received a lesser sentence of 15 years. He would likely be out in 10. He looked at me as they led him away, his eyes pleading for a forgiveness I did not have and could not imagine ever having. The law had balanced the ledger. Justice, in its cold and impartial way, had been served. I returned to the Willows, but it was not my home anymore. It was a crime scene. The beautiful rooms felt tainted, their silence no longer peaceful but heavy with the ghosts of what had happened there. Isabella's ugly modern furniture was a constant, glaring reminder of her presence. The memory of her voice, her lies, echoed in every corner. Richard's house, our sanctuary, had been defiled. I knew I could not stay. To heal, I had to leave. Arthur helped me with the arrangements. We hired a company to remove every piece of furniture Isabella and Thomas had brought into the house, donating it all to charity. And then I put the Willows up for sale. The day before the closing, I walked through its empty rooms one last time. The gray walls Isabella had painted seemed to weep. The sunlight streaming through the windows illuminated dust motes dancing in the empty spaces where our life used to be. I stood in the doorway of Thomas's childhood room. I ran my hand along the mantelpiece where our family photos had once sat. I was not saying goodbye to the house. I was saying goodbye to the woman who had lived there, the trusting mother who had believed in a love that was a lie. I was closing the book on that life, on that version of myself. I closed the front door behind me, the click of the lock a sound of absolute finality, and I did not look back. 2 years later, I live in a place that is the opposite of the Willows. It is a modern condominium in a tall building overlooking the ocean. The walls are white, the rooms are filled with light, and the only history they hold is the one I'm creating now. The constant rhythmic sound of the waves is a soothing balm, a reminder that all things, even the most painful tides, eventually recede. I reconnected with Margaret and my other friends, the true family that had been waiting for me on the other side of my ordeal. I began to volunteer at a center for victims of elder fraud, my professional skills now serving a new, more urgent purpose. I listen to their stories of betrayal, and I offer not just financial guidance, but understanding. I help them see that they are not to blame for trusting the people they loved. I help them find their own strength to fight back. My pain has been transmuted into purpose. I am not the woman I was. The naive, unconditional love I once felt is gone forever. I am more cautious now, more discerning. But I am not bitter. I have found a different kind of peace, one that is not dependent on anyone else for its existence. It is a peace I have earned. This morning, a letter arrived with a prison postmark. It was from Thomas. I have received them before, pages filled with remorse and regret, with pleas for a forgiveness he feels he needs but has no right to ask for. I did not open this one. I put it in a drawer with the others. My healing is not contingent upon his remorse. My peace is my own. I sit on my balcony now, watching the sun glitter on the endless expanse of blue. I have learned the hardest lesson of all, that love is not and should not be unconditional. True love is a ledger that must be balanced. It requires entries of respect, honesty, and loyalty to offset the withdrawals of human frailty. A love that demands you sacrifice your safety, your identity, or your soul is not love at all. It is a debt, a cage, a carefully crafted theft of the self. They thought they could erase me, that they could reduce my life to a final profitable transaction. But they failed. I survived. I fought back, not with weapons, but with the truth. And in the end, I balanced the account. I closed the ledger on my past, and I opened a new one, its pages clean and bright and stretching all the way to the horizon. And on this first page, in my own steady hand, I have written a single, final entry. Paid in full.